Welcome back to our fourth module from the e-learning from MyThesis Academy. So now that you already have a closer idea of how to draft and how to conduct your thesis proposal, I would like to get a little bit more into detail in terms of one of the most important issues and one of the keys of a good thesis. It is about your time management and the time and working schedule. Or if you want to put it another way, of how do you organize your thesis or dissertation. I would like to dedicate this model on an overview on the tasks and the episodes that you have to craft. And I also will provide some models of how to create and also how to format a plan and working schedule, or, well, to put it another way, to present you different models that you may use to create your own one. And I also like to give you some advice on the time management. So let's have a look together on our plan for this class. So as you can see, first we will start with a little introduction on why a good and a smart planning and organization of your time for the thesis is one of the key issues. Then we will drift to the upcoming episodes and periods that you have to craft. And we also will have a look on the time that you may spend if you write a bachelor thesis or master thesis and even a Ph.D. thesis. Then I also like to give you some advice and some available tips on how to beat the deadlines and how to succeed that you submit on time. And last but not least, we will finish with some different models of time and working schedules that you can use as a kind of template for your thesis proposal. To warm up, I provide a little citation for you that I took from the Harvard Extension School, and where they define why a good management and a smart time and working plan is one of the keys for your thesis. They put it like this: the key to completing a thesis is to make sure you have created as detailed a work plan as possible as part of your thesis proposal, and that you then follow through with your plan. The more that you can anticipate ahead of time, the smoother the process will be for you. Well, true story. We will see how to frame the episodes, and we also will make sure that you have a little extra time for all of the upcoming tasks, because this is one of the details that can help you get without any stress through the process. So, first of all, it is very necessary that you know the different stages and, the staircase of the upcoming periods, and that you set these different parts in relation to the time that you will spend on your thesis. For example, if you imagine that the bachelor thesis will take you around 4 months or like 16 weeks, the master thesis around 5 to 6 months, so at least 20 to 26 weeks, and the PhD thesis will take you at least 3 years, but in most of the cases, it is around 6 years or even a little bit more. This depends on a variety of different aspects. Then you have to be very sure about the episodes or the different sections that you have to develop and craft. You already know them from the thesis proposal. So first, you have all the episode of the proposal writing, of the development of your ideas, and of the first part, like of a basic literature research, of the identification of the research gap, and the development of your principal idea, of the thesis statement, the focus, and so on. And then you have to craft the first draft, the prospectus, and well, the conception of your thesis. This is the first episode. Then you will go over directly to the second part after the submission, where you start to develop your theoretical framework, your literature review, and also the research design. And the third step will be the research and the fieldwork. Well, fieldwork, not in any case, but yes, the practical research and the development and the conducting of data sets. Then you have the fourth episode, which will be the part of academic writing, where you will put all the collected data and the results of your analysis in the form of your thesis. And then, as the fifth step, you have the correction, the editing, and the proofreading. And last but not least, all the formal aspects, so the layout and the formatting of your thesis, and everything that you have to complete until the thesis submission. These are the 6 important episodes that you have to plan. And what is crucial here is that you develop, or that you get an idea and a feeling of the different of the lengths of every episode. So, for example, it depends. It depends if you go to do a field work, or if you have some, how can I say, some time that you will spend on the practical research. Also, if you are from the science, then the evaluation and the setup of an investigation in a laboratory, whatever. What is important is that you really divide these 6 episodes in feasible sections, and that you think clearly and in advance and put a little bit of extra time to every single of these 6 sections. Now, before we start to get into detail in terms of the planning of the episodes, I would like to suggest some principal tips and advice. Why is this important? I put it here right at the beginning, because if you keep this kind of tips in mind, I'm sure that it will make your life at the time of thesis writing more easier. Easier. So, some considerations: how to beat the deadlines and how to succeed the final goal, that is to submit on time and also to reach your milestones on time. What is the overall key of the story? First, it is important that you make a realistic calculation right from the start and for every single section. And that you also consider the deadline for your overall plan. So if you can create yourself a deadline for all the 6 sections that I presented you, and try to calculate some difficult sections where you maybe don't have a concrete idea of how many time they can take you, with a little bit of extra time, like with a time buffer, as I said. First of all, try to calculate the fieldwork period not too tight. Why? Because you don't have any idea what will happen in the field. Imagine that you are out on fieldwork and then you have some technical problems, or you also have to deal with the question of interviews, there will be other people, other participants involved, and for this it is necessary that you calculate really some extra time. It is possible that that you have a very tight plan, and then one of your interview partners has to cancel the interview and to realize it on another day or whatever. Or that there are some surprises, like there's an event that you want to documentate and for any reason it is cancelled or whatever. There can be so many details, so many things, and to don't get in a rush, I suggest to have a little bit more time. Another thing that I would like to give you as a suggestion on your way of the planning and of the time management is that you don't underestimate the process of editing and correction. Why is this so important? Because if we have the thesis ready, or we have the manuscript, then we have the imagination that it is already completed. But imagine that you have a thesis of about 200, 300, or even, like in my case, nearly 600 pages. And it is impossible to craft a careful edition and a proofreading within, let's say, 3 or 4 days. You can do it, but it is very complicated because you will slip over the details and you will just have the deadline in your head, thinking about the day that you have to submit it and count the pages that are missing until it is finished. So do yourself the favor and calculate also a realistic time for a careful editing and proofreading. Imagine that you are also not a machine. So there will be a moment when you just overlook things, when you just read the page, but the mind is not really attentive to the mistakes or to the little things like some mistake in grammar or whatever. So this is a second point that you don't have to underestimate. And then as a third suggestion concerning the time buffers, I would suggest that you also calculate some extra time, let's say 2 weeks or something, for some unexpected surprises. Not just in the field or if you are on fieldwork, but also in case that you suffer from a lack of motivation, that you have to that you are passing through a writer's block, that you that you don't feel inspired, for example. So this kind of things can happen, and it is better to be prepared, because if we are getting into a rush and into stress, this is also a factor that will be difficult to overcome, and you will feel, if you have the deadline close, then you feel still more stressed and more blockaded. And to avoid this, here are my suggestions for you. Well, now we are going over to the question of how to frame the episodes. What is important here before we start, and before I will show you more or less the time that you can calculate for the different tasks, I also want to mention that the frame and the time frame for the different stages and episodes of your thesis writing are like an approximation. It is nothing firm. It is to give you an example, because you may it is possible that you advance quickly with some tasks and you spend more time for other tasks, or if you know that you have some difficulties in a certain area, then I beg you that you really calculate more time for this specific area than for another, for example. So this is an example of a time frame that you can take as a kind of orientation for yourself. Here in this example, I just put the bachelor thesis and the master thesis, and after this, we will go over to the Ph.D. thesis, because here you have a kind of changement in the system. As the Ph.D. is like a kind of a full-time job, that is also a task that you don't do just over a few weeks or within a few months, but after all, you will spend like 3 years or even more with a PhD. The structure also varies a little bit more. So just get started with the bachelor and the master thesis, and then I will show you some examples for the timeline of a PhD. Let's take the example of a bachelor thesis that you write in 4 months, or well, 4 to 5 months, and the master thesis in about 5 to 6 months, as an example. Before we start, I also would like to show you some little details that I added here. Like, for example, the plus. This means that you can spend like the 3rd until the 6th week, for example, with the literature review and the theoretical fundament in terms of the bachelor thesis, but it can even be more. Why did I put the plus here? Because the reading and the lecture that you will do, that you will complete, will not end after the 6th week. It can continue, but the main task will change. The main task from the 5th to the 9th week, and the main focus will be the fieldwork and the research. But, well, you have also like a kind of overlapping between the different episodes. Just the focus and the weight will change. But once again, it is also important to keep in mind that if you know, for example, that you have some difficulties to craft all the theoretical frame, and that you are a slow reader, that you need to spend more time on the literature, then you may calculate more time here, and you also can start smooth with the research and the fieldwork, maybe also a little bit earlier. Well, this is really up to you. But as I said, it is a kind of orientation to give you an idea. So from the 1st to the 2nd week, you have all the question of the proposal writing and of the process of the development of your draft, of the admission, and yeah, this process, all this which involves the conception. For the master thesis, as you have some weeks more to write, to craft a master thesis, so I would suggest like 1 or 2 weeks for the bachelor thesis, and at least 1 to 6 weeks for all the proposal writing of the master thesis. Then we go over to the theoretical part, so to the literature review and to the theoretical framework, which will be around the 3rd to the 6th week in the case of a bachelor's thesis, and from the 7th to the 11th week, more or less, in case of a master thesis. Then there will be the practical part, like the research, the setup of collection, and the setup and the collection of data sets. And this can be around the 5th week to the 9th week in the case of a bachelor's thesis, and from the 9th to the 15th week, more or less, in case of a master thesis. As you see here, in the 2nd line, which is the master thesis, I also put like a plus in the theoretical part, the theoretical frame. And then I also already started in the 9th week with the research and fieldwork, because the fieldwork and the practical research will be a little bit more extensive. But you can do it like, as I said, like in a kind of overlapping. So you can continue to read, but you should also start to set up your practical research as early as you can. Then, like on the more or less on the half time, maybe a little bit earlier, so from the 9th till the 14th week, or in the case of the master thesis, from the 14th to the 21st week. I would suggest that you start with the academic writing, so with the setup of your chapters and also with the special sections. You can start to do this in draft form, and then you will get more and more to the detail and to the formulation of the sentences. Yeah, you will refine your document and you will do this step by step. So this takes some time. At least I gave it like, yeah, around 6 weeks. Yeah, well, 5-6 weeks in the terms of a bachelor thesis. And well, more or less 8 weeks in the case of a master thesis. And then we are slowly reaching to the last part of the process, which is the editing and the proofreading. I gave it like 2 weeks in the case of the bachelor thesis, and also in the terms of the master thesis. So you really have to see, you have to estimate like the scope of your document, and maybe it is a good idea if you make a kind of check and you start to read some pages and you stop the time, just to know more or less how many time one full page will take you to edit and to correct. And then if you know more or less how many time 1 or 2 pages will take you, then you can also make a kind of estimation for the rest. But you should keep in mind that you also have to check and to double check the references, the footnotes, whatever, that you have to pay attention on the tables and figures and on all the formatting and on the layout. So this is some extra that is not included just in the lecture of 1 page. So this will be the last part, like everything which is around the finalization of your thesis or dissertation. And I also included the part of collecting the documents that you need for the submission and the stuff. So last but not least, this is a calculation that is available for a bachelor thesis of the duration, from the duration of about 16 weeks, and the master thesis if you want to write it within 24 weeks. So just to sum it up, just to don't let it stand alone, like without the details. These are some things that you already know from the proposal writing, but I just would like to make clear which parts and which details you have to calculate if you are working on your time frame. So first, for the proposal writing, you should give some time for the start and for the question of the first development of an idea. Then you have to calculate some time for the first literature research and also for the development of your research question, the focus, aims and objective, and some time for the conclusion, like really for the draft of your conception and also of the of the overall approach that you will take from the theoretical and methodological side and also from the practical one. Then from the 3rd to the 6th or from the 7th to the 11th week, you should calculate first the research, like a profound research on relevant literature that is written on your topic, and then you should calculate some time for the critical lecture, like for the selection of the main concepts and also for the division of what is important for you and what you will include for some summaries and excerpts, and finally for the preparation of your literature and the theoretical chapter. For the fieldwork, you would have to plan the fieldwork in different episodes or periods, like there's a part of the preparation of fieldwork, so everything that you have to organize and to plan in advance, details that you also can plan in advance. Then you should calculate some time for the conduction of the fieldwork, so for the data collection, and maybe for the dissertation, like for the doctoral dissertation, for sure that you can do it in a splitted fieldwork, so that you can come back for several times. For example, this is also something that you have to calculate. For example, in my case, like I had to document the process of composition in the summer schools from Rio de Janeiro, and I also had to record the composers competition that takes place one time a year. So I had to come back several years to record and to produce material on this specific event. And so these are things that you have to know in advance. How will you conduct your fieldwork episodes? Then you also should calculate some time for the first review of your collected material, and to get an idea and to know if you need to go back and to collect more material, if there are some additional sources that you may need, and if the material that you collected is sufficient. And you will need some time for the theoretical sampling and the selection of your case studies. So these are the points that you should keep in mind if you plan the section of the research and the fieldwork. The same that I mentioned for the fieldwork is something that you can apply to the work in a laboratory, for example. If you have different stages and different moments of experiments that you have to conduct, and then you may need to repeat or whatever. So think about this and try to plan it in small steps. Now we are going over to the second half of the key stages. So now that we are leaving the fieldwork and the practical data collection, we are starting with the analysis and the process of academic writing. So the writing of your chapters and your sections. Here you have to calculate the time that you need for the analysis of your field data and your sources. And then you should think about the time that you can spend on the central academic writing. So the theoretical, the empirical, and the discussion chapters. It is also crucial that you include some time sections when you will work on the small chapters, like on the conclusion or on the sections, on the special sections. On the conclusion, on the prospectus, like on the further research questions, on the introduction, and on the abstract. These sections are a little bit outstanding, where the conclusion is still connected to the discussion chapter. So you may write the discussion chapter and you are getting smoothly into the conclusion, but the further research question and the introduction, that is maybe the last that you write before the abstract, are special or specific sections that are a little bit outstanding and that you may calculate separately. And then you also have to think about some time that you have to invert in the part of the references and also of the annex and the tables and figures. What goes into the calculation of the editing and the proofreading? I already provided some tips and some advice, like how you can start to calculate the time that you need for proofreading or for the correction. If you want to know in advance, before you wrote a single page of your thesis, how you may advance with editing and proofreading, you can also take page from a former term paper, for example, and do an example, and read it through, correct it, read it through, whatever. This is a possibility to know approximately the time that you will spend on 1 or 2 pages. You put a little bit more because if you read a former term paper, for example, this is something that you already handed in, so something that you already corrected. This means that it will take you less time than some unedited page from the thesis. So stop the time and then give it some minutes more to know more or less how many time you will spend reading 1 page. In the correction and the revision, you should think about the things, the issues that you will pay attention, that you will correct. So this will be grammar and language. Okay, also the academic tone, but this goes as one. Then also the clarity and the logical and conscious structure, the vocabulary, the overall structure, and also the completeness. So these are some things that will enter in the category of the correction. And to finish this section, you will spend some time on the layout and on the formatting. If you want to get a closer idea, then have a look on the page of your department, because I'm sure that they provide some formatting guidelines. And you can make your life a little bit easier if you print it out or even download these guidelines and requirements in advance. And it also gives you an idea of the work that it will take you to format. Last but not least, there's also the question of printing and binding, and also the submission of your required documents. So contact some copy shop. Maybe there's a specific one that you already know, where you already went another time, and ask them for some information about how long it takes. You have to know more or less the scope, like the extent of your thesis. If you go to the copy shop and ask them how many time it will take to print and to bind the thesis, and provide them with some details, like if you want to do it in a hardcover form or whatever your university requires. So this is also something that you should keep in mind when you plan all the finishing episode of your thesis writing. So now we will get over to the structure of the PhD timeline. As I said, this is a little bit more complicated because you have the PhD as a kind of full-time job. This means that the time that you will spend on the PhD doesn't just consist of the PhD itself, but also of some kind of other tasks and of courseworks and whatever. So to warm up and to get a first idea, I provided a timeline from the first to the third year. That is a kind of general overview. So in the first year, you start with a coursework that consists of different classes that you will attend, and also of some language qualification. Then you also will concentrate on the question of the proposal, so on the preparation, and also on the achievement of some deeper field knowledge from your specific area. In the second year, you will have some examinations on the courses that you made and also on the languages. And you will also take over some teaching activities, so as a teaching assistant. Then you will go over to the moment of the proposal submission, that generally goes together with a kind of defense in the colloquia with the thesis committee. And from the 3rd year to the 5th year, or even to the 6th year, you will be occupied with the process of research and writing, and last but not least, with the submission and with the defense. So here, to put it in another way, I just would like to provide some details on the timeline that we have seen in the past slides. So first, note that dependent to your program and to its specific overall structure, the timeline of your PhD can differ. So dependent to your program, to the department, to the university, it differs. After all, keep in mind that it is a full-time job, as I said, and as such, it requires your full attention and a lot of energy. I don't want to say all of your energy, because you also have other tasks than the PhD, and you have also some duties and some things that that you have apart from the PhD and the responsibilities of your PhD, but it requires a big part of your energy. Additional to your thesis, you need to attend courses, to pass examinations, and also to realize some lectures and some take over some teaching responsibilities as a teaching assistant. In the 1st and 2nd year, you have to complete some courses and some coursework. Here I took the example from Yale, where they require that you do 6 courses in the 1st and 4 to 6 in the 2nd year. Then there are also some additional requirements, such as the competences in foreign language, or that you improve your competences and the skills in foreign languages, and also specific language requirements of your specific field. The 3rd and the 4th year are reserved to complete the comprehensive examinations, like there's a written and an oral part on your field. This is more or less by the end of the 6th semester, when you have to complete these examinations. And at this very moment, so at the final moment of the 3rd year, you will become a PhD candidate. If your prospectus, so your thesis proposal, is qualified, is qualifying you as such a candidate. So if you have fulfilled the 10 courses, the examination, and if you have submitted your thesis proposal. In the 3rd and the 4th year, you will also realize some lectures. So as a kind of qualification and also as a professional training, because this is what you will do after your PhD. You will basically spend time teaching at university in the function of a professor. So this is a kind of professional training. And then you have the main work on your dissertation. So you also have to complete a chapter conference or colloquia with the committee before the submission and the defense. But well, the 5th and the 6th year are reserved for your dissertation, for the research and the writing, and there are also universities which require that you participate in some conferences, that you publish papers, and so on. This is up to the department and to the university, but you should keep it in mind that it can be required. So now is the moment where I would like to provide you with some specific examples of PhD timelines. As the first example, I tried to vary a little bit in terms of the field and also in terms of the university, that you can see that there are like different possibilities how they can put it and what you can require. The examples that I chose here are some examples that I took directly from the pages of the related universities that you can see here. For example, in this first one, this is from the University of Michigan, from the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering. And if you want to search for it on your own and check it, I also left you here the related link. So let's have a look on the timeline for completing the thesis, milestones, and the requirements that they set in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th to 5th year. So they divided in some program requirements and milestones, and also in some program expectations. Like, as I said, you have here the 2nd year, for example, some conference attendance where you have to present your work. You have some journal publications in the 3rd to the 5th year. So some publications and also some presentations of your work, which are like specific program expectations on you. And within the program requirements that you have to fulfill, you have in the 1st year the beginning of your coursework, you have the research curriculum, you have the research skill courses. Well, this is the basic. Then you have the 2nd year where you have, for example, the research fundamental exams. So the first examinations. Then you have the language skills, as you see here. And, well, further requirements. Then you will advance to the candidacy. So the 3rd year is basically for the 3rd year is basically for the dissertation proposal and to prepare all of your conception. It will finish with an exam, and then you enter in the 4th year, which is basically involved with the thesis writing process, as you can see here, thesis dissertation, and is finished with first with the written part and then with the second part, which is the oral defense. This is a little figure from the University of Michigan and how they present the program and the examination. So here we have another example that is called a typical timetable for full-time PhD students from the University of California. It is not related to a specific area, like in the case that we had in Michigan for the mechanical engineering, but it is like a general and overall timetable or timeline. So they present their program in month. So they put it from the first month until the 48th month. And here they put it in different steps. So here is all the part of the preparation. You can also see like they have a research log that has to be activated. Then the field of study has to be agreed. There has to be the assignment of the supervisors, and there also has to exist a timetable for the supervisory meetings and the progress reports. This is what they require as a part of the preparation in the first month, and also, well, in the second. Then, until the third month, there has to be a complete agreement of the thesis working plan, of the research method, and also of the time and working schedule. So this is basically the content of the expose of the thesis proposal. And there also has to be an agreement of the attendance at skills development program and arrangements that are made for further required study. By the 6 months, you have to update for the first time the research log with your progress. And in another 6 months, you have to get the agreement of a program for the second year of the study. This is related to the question of the progress report. So they will check it and then they will admit that you go on. Well, also in the first year, like in the end of the first year, you have to write an upgrade report and you have to attend an upgrade viva, so an oral defense. Then there will the transfer of the registration to a PhD. In the second year, it will be requested that you submit and assess your second year progress report on the research log, and that you have an agreement of the thesis structure and a strict timetable for thesis writing. So this is also, if you compare it to Michigan, at the end of the second year, you have to provide a full plan, like a full draft of what you are planning to do in your thesis, with your thesis, and you also have to report some progresses. Then in the third year, you have to submit an entry for the examination form. And well, last but not least, in the fourth year, you have to complete everything, like you have to transfer the complete research progress and submit your thesis. This is what provides the University of California as a typical timetable. I know this is more an overall perspective, so you have an idea more or less how many time you will spend on the thesis. But once again, you can do it, the calculation of your timetable and the time and working schedule, similar to the example that I provided for a master and for a bachelor's thesis. Here is just important that you don't take the time period of several months, like I put it in the example of the bachelor and the master, but that you take the time frame that you will have for the PhD thesis. So now I have a third example for you where you can see the PhD program and the timeline from the example of the Harvard University, from the Faculty of Religious Studies. Here you can also see that it is split in 4 main episodes, and that you have the first and the second year together, which is basically for coursework, for languages, and which is finished with a second year review. What do they require? First, they require a full-time study during the first and the second year, where you have to attend some specific courses within your qualification and your special field of interest. So here they put it like as we have the example of religious studies. So you have religion 2001 and religion 2002, like the first term and the second term is an example, and 2 additional courses outside your area of specialization. This is also in the case of other universities, they require like a concrete number of courses that you have to attend, and the majority of the courses is from your specific field, but there are also some additional courses that are like related, but that are not necessarily from your specialization. This is also, well, the idea is also to keep it broader, to don't make you just an expert of your specific area, but to keep it a little bit, a little bit broader. Then they also require languages. So here you have to attend courses in modern languages, for example, and an additional language as required for the specialization. It is finished with the second year review by the end of the 4th term. In the third year, what you will take over are the teaching responsibilities, and you also have to attend the general examinations. So this is basically what will happen in the third year. So the student teaching as a part of your professional training is like, it's like 2 traditional course sections, and the general examinations has to be completed by the end of the 6th term. So the general examination will be on the courses that you took and will be some comprehensive examinations. The 4th year, in this case, is reserved for your proposal writing. So with the construction and the drafting of your dissertation prospectus, and is to be completed within 12 months after doing the general exams. And the 5th year and the following is just reserved for the dissertation writing process. So after the approval of the exposé of your thesis proposal, you at least need to submit 1 chapter per year with your supervisor. And normally the 7th year is to have the full dissertation completed, and this year will finish with, or this episode will finish with your defense. As the last example for a thesis timeline of a PhD, I took the example of Yale, of the Faculty of Medicine. As you see, they provided the overview a little bit different. They put it in a timeline, and you can see here the 1st and the 2nd year, and then 3rd, 4th year, and the additional year. So the final year, and like the re-entry. On the upper side, they noted the month, and they tried to provide a kind of timeline in blocks where you can read what is requested in a year, and also more or less how many months it will take you. So you can see here, you have the start and, wait. Okay, so we are starting here in the 1st year with June and July and August, so in summertime. Then you have all the graduate coursework. So this is basically, the coursework is basically what you have in the 1st year, and also some specific skills. So as we are in the Faculty of Medicine, so we also have the clinical skills, for example. Then you pass to the 2nd year. Then you have your integrated course curriculum, and you have the lab rotation. So this is practical stuff. Then we go over to the 3rd year, where you have basically the graduate school coursework once again. And then in the 4th year, you have the thesis prospectus. So thesis prospectus finishing with the defense of the prospective, and also with you also have some qualifying exams of the PhD to qualify yourself as the PhD candidate, and you also have the teaching responsibilities. And then from the 5th year on, you have to complete the thesis. And yeah, you will finish everything with the thesis defense. This is just in a short version how they put it. Well, now I like to go over to some concrete examples where I show you how a time and working schedule can look like and provide some models with different characteristics. Here you can see a working schedule that is divided, that is first made in just in bullet points and created in a kind of table form, and it provides the tasks here on the left hand side and here on the upper side it relates the month, so the episode that it will take you to do it, to realize it at one glance. So here, if you have a look, then you will see everything that you already know from our different sections. What is special is that you have the main task like in a highlighted version, and then as a subcategory you have the different tasks that are part of the section. So you have mainly the research for literature and the proposal writing. Then you have the data collection and the fieldwork, also the literature review and the theoretical part, preparation of fieldwork. Here, in the second part of the data collection and the practical fieldwork, it is important that you divide your concrete fieldwork episodes, and you have all the process of the data collection, of the theoretical sampling and the selection of your material, of the analysis, and then you will enter in the central writing period, where this is everything you know already. And last but not least, you have the editing, proofreading, the layout, and the finalization. So, and here in this upper field, you can put the months, like to give it an example, January 2021, February, March, and so on. This is one version, how you can put it. Then this is a second possibility. Here you can see that you have the months, like the episode on the left hand side, and then you have the on the right hand side you have a concrete description of everything that you are planning to do in a certain period. This is an example from my thesis proposal. So, for example, I started here in November 2013 with the submission of the expose, and with the entrance to the PhD program at the Academy or University of Music, Franz Liszt in Weimar, under the supervision supervision of Professor Tiago de Oliveira Pinto. Then until December, I researched for material, for some secondary material. I included a small fieldwork episode during the month of the composers competition. I also could realize some first interviews and collecting some materials in Rio. This was still before the main process of theoretical setup, but this was also because I was there were these months when the crucial events took part, and so I had to realize some first fieldwork already in this period. Well, this is, I don't want to read it all out. It is just to give you an idea how it can be. Like here you have the episodes, the months, when you are planning to do something, and here you have like everything that is included and that is part of this episode. Yeah, and here in this version you have the same story in another way. As you can see, my university asked me to provide 2 versions of a time and working schedule. So this was one where I had everything in paragraphs in a running text. And the second part was this, where I just had to provide the overview in a kind of table form. So this is very similar, but as you can see here, you have another kind of model. So you have the episodes in a highlighted form. This is the German example, but it is here it is just necessary that you have a look at the format so that you can see. Then you have a second form and a second possibility how you can put it. It is in another kind of table form. For example, my university required 2 versions. One had to be the running text and a summary, some paragraphs, and the related episodes in running text, and then also in table form, like what you have here. This is one example from my own PhD proposal. So you can see it is divided in the episodes that I completed between November 2013, when I handed my PhD proposal in and qualified myself as a PhD candidate. You can see I wrote here, or I named it, described it with the starting moment of a PhD at the University of Music Franz Liszt Weimar, supervised by Professor Tiago de Oliveira Pinto. Then I provided here on the left-hand side, so deferring to the example that we had, where we had the upper scale, the upper field, which was reserved for the time frame of every episode, separated in month, and the left-hand side for the tasks that were to complete in one specific episode. And here you see I did not divide it exactly in every single month, but I divided in episodes, like in November 2013, then from December until January, then more or less large episode, which was from January 2014 until July 2014, and then July 2014 till March 2015. Yeah, and in the scale that is reserved for the description, I tried to provide some information, some detailed information of what did I plan to do and to realize in this specific stage. Well, this is one version how you can put it. Now I want to show you another model that is very common. Like, as I said, my own university required one time and working schedule, one draft of the time and working schedule in form of a running text written or realized in paragraphs, and the other, the additional one, in a short form, just providing the episode and adding some detailed information of the specific tasks that are to be completed in this episode. So here you have the same story, just in another way, in a running text. I provided some detailed information on the principal episode of my fieldwork. So here I put a kind of list of the events that I like to attend in Rio, and also of the moments of the principal happenings that I want to record and register. So this is a second version, and you should also keep in mind that these two models are in a kind of short form. So the length is also something that you should discuss with your supervisor, how he likes to have it. Then I like to share you a third example, which is also my own one from the German PhD, well, from the PhD, but this time, in German. Here you see that it is similar to the last one that you saw, but the episodes, so start of the dissertation in November 2013, then from January 2014 until July 2014. This is kind of highlighted. So what is characteristic for this kind of working schedule? Well, it's very easy. It is written in sentences, and the different working stages are separated, like divided in separate paragraphs. Here I started with the episode, so I mentioned the concrete month. that I will take to realize some work, and I drafted the related tasks in full sentences. So these are basically the versions that you can use to create your time and working schedule. For sure, it is also possible to create a kind of timeline, like as the example in the more visual form. For example, the model that you saw from the timeline, Ph.D. timeline from Yale, for example, where they put it really in a timeline and in colored blocks. This is also a possibility. Once more, this is a little bit up to you, up to the forum that you like it to put, and for sure also to your supervisor and to your university or to the requirements of the university. Some will leave it up to you, and others will demand a certain format. So, before we close this fourth model and move on to the fifth, which will be about the theoretical fundament, about your literature review, and also the theory frame, I would like to sum up what you took from this class. This class was basically about your time and working schedule and provided all the information that you should keep in mind and that you should consider when you think about the planning and the time management for your thesis or dissertation. First, we had a look on the different stages that make out a thesis staircase. So from the idea until the submission, the 6 stages that you have to keep in mind. Then we looked up the key stages and we discussed the framing of the main episodes. Also, the question of what you should consider when you plan every episode. I also talked about the question of how to beat deadlines and what do you have to consider, some little secrets that you should keep in mind when you want to complete your thesis. I don't want to say without stress, but at least with less stress and without getting in a rush. And last but not least, I showed you some different models of timelines and of time and working schedules that you can use as a template to create your one. Well, now it is time that you think about your specific timetable, that you keep in mind all the episodes that are part of the process, and that you take 1 or 2 of the templates and start to create your own draft. Keep in mind that you should put some time buffers, and if you have the possibility, if you can, then calculate some extra time and think about the episodes and the tasks that are maybe the most complicated and or the ones that are less possible to calculate, for example, as a field work or even practical research at a laboratory and an experiment that you may need to repeat or whatever. So think about all these details and try to fill out the templates to complete your time and working schedule. See you in the 5th module.